Mark and Lisa had built a life that many would envy. Their modest home sat neatly in a suburban neighborhood, surrounded by well-kept lawns and quiet streets. They had 2 children, both bright and full of energy, who filled the house with laughter most days. Mark worked as a project manager at a construction company, while Lisa ran a small but successful online business selling handmade jewelry. To the outside world, their marriage seemed stable, even enviable. They attended community events, celebrated holidays with friends and family, and rarely showed signs of tension. People often said they were the perfect couple, the kind who knew how to balance love and responsibility. But beneath this calm surface, small cracks had started to appear, so subtle that only Mark noticed. At first it was the little things. Lisa growing more distant during dinner, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. Mark brushed these off, blaming the stress of balancing work and family. Lisa's business had been expanding rapidly, requiring her to spend more time online, more time on the phone. She often stayed late at her desk or in the living room, working by the glow of her laptop while Mark tried to ignore the growing silence between them. The changes didn't stop there. Lisa began locking her phone screen more frequently, something she had never done before. She started wearing new perfumes and changed her wardrobe, dressing more carefully, almost as if she was preparing for someone else's eyes. Mark found himself waiting for her to fall asleep, before checking if she had left her phone unattended, hoping for a sign that his fears were wrong. The messages he glimpsed were mostly business-related, but something felt off. Her laughter when she talked on the phone was softer, more secretive. She became protective of her privacy in a way that felt unfamiliar. Mark's mind raced with questions he dared not voice. Was Lisa unhappy? Had he done something wrong? Or was there someone else? The thought gnawed at him, growing heavier with each passing day. He tried to hold on to the life they had built, convincing himself that this was just a rough patch, a temporary phase. But the distance between them grew wider, a quiet divide filled with unspoken worries and restless nights. One night, after the kids were asleep, Mark sat alone in the living room. The house was dark except for the soft light of the television, but his mind was far from calm. He replayed every conversation, every glance, every silence from the past few weeks. He remembered how Lisa's phone had buzzed repeatedly during dinner without her checking it, how she sometimes left the room abruptly. A sinking feeling settled in his chest. Something was wrong, and he was running out of time to figure it out. Mark thought back to the early days of their marriage, the easy laughter, the late-night talks, the promises made with hope and love. He wondered when things had started to change. Had he missed the signs? Was he blinded by trust? The more he thought about it, the more isolated he felt. He was no longer sure if the woman beside him in bed was the same person he had married. In the following days, Mark's instincts pushed him to be more alert. He started noticing small details he hadn't before. An unfamiliar scent on Lisa's clothes, the way her phone lit up with names he didn't recognize, the hurried texts she deleted too quickly. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. He needed answers. The image of his perfect life, once so clear, was now clouded by suspicion. Mark didn't want to believe the worst. He wanted to hold on to the hope that there was a simple explanation. But every piece of the puzzle he uncovered told a different story, a story of secrecy and betrayal that threatened to destroy everything he held dear. The man who had once trusted completely now felt like a stranger in his own home. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's worry turned into obsession. He found himself waiting for Lisa to leave the house, then searching for clues, checking receipts, tracking phone records, trying to make sense of the silence that had swallowed their relationship. Each discovery chipped away at his hope, making it harder to deny the truth. The perfect life they had built was starting to crumble, and Mark was left standing at the edge of a dark and uncertain path, forced to face a reality he never imagined. The unraveling had begun. Mark's growing suspicions soon turned into something he could no longer ignore. One evening, while Lisa was out attending a business event, Mark found himself alone in their bedroom. His heart hammered with a mix of anxiety and determination as he reached for Lisa's phone, which she had carelessly left on the nightstand. The screen lit up immediately, revealing a string of messages he wasn't supposed to see. The words on the screen shattered the last fragments of his hope. Lisa was not just distant. She was involved with someone else, someone whose name Mark knew all too well. The messages were intimate and frequent, filled with affection and plans that left no room for misunderstanding. It was clear that this affair was not a brief mistake, but something ongoing. The man in question was Paul, Mark's close friend since college, someone he had trusted like a brother. The betrayal cut deeper than Mark ever imagined. The man he had invited into his home, shared holidays with and confided in was the one who had been lying behind his back. Mark's mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many times had Paul sat across from him at their favorite bar, pretending everything was fine? The sense of shock gave way to a cold, burning anger. But beneath the rage, a gnawing sadness took hold. A grief for the loss of trust in the life he thought was secure. He realized this was no longer just about a wife's betrayal. It was a double betrayal by the two people he had loved most. In the days that followed, Mark tried to piece together the extent of the affair. He checked phone records, traced messages, and even followed Lisa's movements discreetly. Each new discovery was a fresh wound. He saw photos exchanged between them, late-night meetings at cafes, secret texts filled with longing. The evidence was undeniable. Lisa and Paul had built a hidden world, a secret life that had been thriving while Mark was left in the dark. Mark's friends began to notice the change in him. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a restless intensity. He stopped answering calls, avoided social gatherings, and spent hours staring at his phone or computer searching for answers. But the more he uncovered, the less he understood. There were gaps in the story, strange inconsistencies that didn't add up. He began to suspect that Lisa and Paul were hiding even more than the affair. One evening, Mark found a series of emails on Lisa's laptop that hinted at something more complicated. The messages discussed money transfers and plans to meet in secret places far from town. Suddenly, the affair seemed less like a simple act of passion and more like part of a bigger scheme. Was Lisa involved in something dangerous? Was Paul using their relationship to manipulate or exploit her? The questions multiplied, twisting Mark's emotions into confusion and dread. Despite the chaos in his mind, Mark knew one thing for sure. He could no longer trust either of them. The woman he had loved and the friend he had trusted were now strangers, united by deception and betrayal. The perfect life was gone, replaced by a web of lies that threatened to consume everything Mark cared about. As Mark wrestled with his feelings, he began to plan. He knew that confronting Lisa or Paul directly could lead to unpredictable consequences. He also feared losing control of the situation. The idea of turning to the police crossed his mind, but he hesitated, unsure if justice would be served or if his private pain would become public spectacle. Instead, he decided to take matters into his own hands, to find a way to reclaim control and get the answers he desperately needed. Mark's nights became restless as he researched, observed, and waited for the right moment. Every decision felt heavier, every heartbeat louder. The man who had once trusted without question was now calculating his next move carefully, teetering on the edge between heartbreak and something darker. What had started as suspicion was now a burning resolve. Mark's world had shifted and there was no going back. The man who had found out about the affair was no longer the same person. He was someone ready to face whatever it would take to confront the truth. But as he prepared to act, none of them could predict just how far Mark was willing to go or how much damage would be left in his wake. The story was no longer just about betrayal. It was about a man pushed to the edge, forced to take matters into his own hands. The Days following his shocking discovery blurred into a haze of restless nights and mounting anxiety for Mark. The man who had once been patient and trusting was now consumed by thoughts of betrayal and revenge. His emotions churned in a storm of anger, hurt, and confusion, leaving him unable to focus on anything else. Every time his phone buzzed or the door creaked, his heart leapt, wondering if it was Lisa or Paul coming to explain, to apologize, or to escalate the situation further. But no answers came. The silence only made the void between them grow deeper. Mark's once orderly life fell apart. He stopped going to work regularly, his mind too clouded with turmoil to focus on projects and meetings. The cheerful home filled with family warmth turned cold and quiet. The children sensed the change in their father but didn't understand why. Lisa's absence from the house grew longer as she juggled business trips and late nights, often avoiding eye contact whenever they crossed paths. Mark felt like a ghost in his own home, haunted by memories of better times and the painful reality of the present. Isolation became Mark's refuge. He avoided friends and family, unable to explain the betrayal or confront the embarrassment of his crumbling marriage. The only company he sought was his own thoughts, and they were relentless. Each memory of Lisa's laughter or Paul's easy friendship twisted into fresh pain. Mark's mind became a battlefield between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. In this dark place, Mark's thoughts grew darker still. The desire for revenge was no longer just a fleeting impulse. It took root and grew. He started planning carefully, methodically. He watched Lisa's movements, noted Paul's habits, and mapped out their routines. Every detail became a potential opportunity. Every moment a chance to regain control. But Mark knew this wasn't a game. Whatever he chose to do could change lives forever. Still, the thirst for justice or vengeance pushed him forward. Mark's anger was not blind rage but a cold, calculated fury. He didn't want to lash out recklessly. He wanted to hit where it would hurt most, to send a message that betrayal came with a price. As the days passed, he gathered information, texts, emails, photos, building a file of proof and evidence. His heart hardened with every page he added. The betrayal had been deep, deliberate, and ongoing. There was no going back. Despite the anger, part of Mark still wrestled with doubt and regret. What if he was wrong to take this path? What if there was a chance for forgiveness or reconciliation? Those thoughts were brief, fleeting sparks quickly extinguished by the overwhelming sense of betrayal and loss. Mark understood that once he crossed the line, everything would change. There would be no turning back to the life they once shared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark found himself standing outside Paul's house. The familiar neighborhood street, once a place of laughter and friendship, now felt like the edge of a battlefield. Mark's hand trembled as he held his phone, debating whether to make a call or leave a message. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, but the rage beneath his skin demanded action. He turned away without a word and began to walk, his mind racing with plans and what-ifs. In the quiet hours of the night, Mark began assembling tools and items he thought he might need. He packed a small bag with essentials, his movements slow but purposeful. The line between victim and aggressor blurred as he prepared to take matters into his own hands. The man who had once sought peace was now ready for confrontation, ready to face the consequences of his own decisions. The tension inside Mark built until it became unbearable. His restless pacing, sleepless nights, and obsessive planning took their toll. He barely ate, barely slept, and barely spoke. The man who had been calm and steady was now a prisoner of his own mind, a mind filled with anger, fear, and the need for control. What Mark didn't realize was that this descent into darkness was only the beginning. His carefully laid plans, fueled by betrayal and pain, were about to unleash a chain of events none of them could have predicted. The line between justice and vengeance, right and wrong, would become dangerously thin. Mark was no longer just a husband betrayed. He had become a man on the edge, ready to take matters into his own hands, whatever the cost. The story was no longer about love or loss. It was about a man pushed beyond his limits, and the dark path that lay ahead. The night held its breath, waiting for what was to come. The night air was thick with tension as Mark's mind raced through every possible scenario. He had reached a point where waiting no longer felt like an option. The pain of betrayal had morphed into something darker, an urge to confront, to act, to reclaim control over a life that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. The hours ticked by slowly as he prepared himself for what he knew could change everything. Mark left his house quietly, careful not to wake his children or Lisa, who was home for the first time in days. His heart pounded with every step, but beneath the fear was a fierce determination. He had rehearsed the confrontation in his head countless times, imagining how it might unfold. What he hadn't anticipated was the raw intensity that would explode the moment he faced the man who had shattered his trust. When Mark arrived at Paul's house, the familiar porch light cast long shadows across the yard. The quiet suburban street was deserted, amplifying the feeling of isolation. Mark hesitated briefly before knocking. The door opened almost immediately. Paul's surprised expression shifted quickly to something unreadable as he recognized who stood before him. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Words turned to anger, anger to violence. Mark's carefully held composure broke under the weight of years of betrayal and heartbreak. The fight that erupted wasn't just about the affair. It was about shattered trust, lost friendship, and a man's desperate need to make things right in his own way. In the heat of the moment, actions were taken that could never be undone. The neighbors would later describe hearing raised voices and a sudden crash, but none dared to intervene until it was too late. When the police arrived, they found Paul injured and Mark standing nearby, bloodied and shaken. The scene was chaotic. Mark's hands trembled, the weight of what he had done settling heavily on his shoulders. He was taken into custody immediately, the quiet street now buzzing with the shock of what had transpired. Lisa, when informed of the incident, was devastated. The affair she had kept secret was now out in the open, but the violence that followed was something she had never imagined. The community was left reeling, struggling to reconcile the man they knew with the one who had taken such drastic action. Questions swirled about what had pushed Mark over the edge and whether there had been warning signs that everyone had missed. In the days that followed, Mark's actions became the subject of intense scrutiny. The police investigation uncovered the extent of the affair and the lies that had built up over months. But what shocked many was the level of premeditation in Mark's plan to confront Paul. He hadn't acted purely out of passion. There was a cold calculation behind his moves, a determination to make Paul pay for the betrayal. The courtroom became a battleground for more than just Mark's fate. The trial exposed hidden truths about the marriage, the friendship, and the secrets that had been buried beneath years of trust. Lisa's role came under question, not just as a wife who cheated, but as someone involved in a web of deception that extended beyond the affair itself. The community's sympathy was divided, torn between understanding Mark's pain and condemning his violent response. Mark's defense argued that the betrayal had pushed him into a state of emotional and mental crisis, clouding his judgment and leading to an impulsive act. The prosecution painted a different picture, one of a man who took the law into his own hands and caused irreversible harm. The judge and jury faced the difficult task of weighing these perspectives, trying to determine justice in a situation where no one was entirely innocent. The media attention added another layer of complexity. Headlines screamed betrayal and violence, while opinion pieces debated the fine line between justice and revenge. Mark's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked emotions and the consequences of taking matters into one's own hands. But beneath the sensationalism, there was a tragic story of a man broken by love and betrayal, pushed to the edge of despair. As the trial unfolded, the community struggled to come to terms with the aftermath. Friendships fractured, families were torn apart, and the once quiet neighborhood was forever changed. The perfect life Mark had known was gone, replaced by a dark chapter that none of them would forget. The consequences of that night would ripple for years to come, a haunting reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered, and how far someone might go when pushed beyond their limits. Mark's choice to act on his pain was a turning point, one that would define not only his life but the lives of everyone involved. What began as a secret affair ended in tragedy, proving that some wounds run too deep to heal and some actions cannot be undone. The night Mark took matters into his own hands marked the end of one story and the beginning of another, one filled with loss, regret, and the long, difficult road toward whatever justice could be found. The days following the violent confrontation were heavy with silence and uncertainty. Mark was behind bars, charged with assault, and the community was left grappling with the fallout of what had happened. The man who had once been seen as calm and dependable was now at the center of a story filled with betrayal, violence, and heartbreak. As the legal process began, the layers of the situation slowly started to unravel, revealing secrets no one had expected. Lisa's world was upended. The affair she had tried so hard to keep hidden was now public knowledge, and with it came judgment and scrutiny from friends, neighbors, and even family. But what shocked everyone most was the revelation of how complicated her involvement truly was. The investigation uncovered financial records and communications that suggested Lisa's relationship with Paul was more than just an affair. It was part of a carefully orchestrated scheme. The money transfers hinted at something far more sinister, raising questions about Lisa's intentions and whether she had been manipulating those around her. Mark, despite his actions, was portrayed by many as a victim of this elaborate deception. His defense team focused on his emotional state, arguing that the betrayal had pushed him into a moment of madness. They painted a picture of a man whose trust had been shattered, whose heart had been broken in the cruelest way. The trial became as much about the emotional damage inflicted on Mark as it was about the physical harm he caused. Witnesses described the strain on Mark, how he had changed from a loving husband and friend to a man consumed by pain and anger. The prosecution, however, argued that Mark's actions were deliberate and dangerous. They emphasized that no matter the betrayal, violence was never the answer. The legal debate centered on whether Mark's act was a crime of passion or a calculated assault. The jury struggled to balance sympathy for Mark's situation with the need for accountability and justice. This struggle was mirrored in the court of public opinion, where people debated the fine line between justice and revenge. As the trial progressed, more surprising details emerged. Lisa's double life became clearer, revealing a pattern of lies and manipulation that extended beyond Paul. Neighbors reported seeing strange visitors to her home, and financial investigators uncovered unusual transactions linked to accounts overseas. It became apparent that the affair was only the tip of an iceberg, a symptom of a far more complex web of deceit. This revelation complicated the narrative, challenging the simplistic view of a betrayed husband and cheating wife. Throughout it all, Mark remained distant, his once fiery determination tempered by the weight of legal battles and public judgment. The man who had taken matters into his own hands was now forced to face the consequences, caught in a system that demanded answers and punishment. The impact of his actions rippled through his family, fracturing relationships and leaving scars that would not easily heal. The children, caught in the middle, became symbols of the collateral damage caused by adult mistakes. Friends and relatives struggled to support them while grappling with their own feelings of betrayal and confusion. The community, once tight-knit, found itself divided, some sympathizing with Mark's pain, others condemning his violent choice, and many more bewildered by the complicated truths that surfaced. When the verdict finally came, it was met with mixed emotions. Mark was found guilty of assault, but given a sentence that reflected the complexities of his case, a reminder that justice is rarely black and white. The judge acknowledged the profound emotional trauma Mark had endured while underscoring the importance of upholding the law. The decision left no clear winner, only a lingering sense of loss and tragedy. In the years that followed, the story remained a cautionary tale, a stark example of how betrayal and anger can lead to irreversible consequences. Mark served his sentence, carrying with him the burden of his choices. Lisa faced her own legal battles and the fallout from the secrets that had been exposed. Paul disappeared from the public eye, leaving behind a fractured friendship and a community struggling to heal. The quiet neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but the scars remained. The perfect life that Mark and Lisa had once seemed to lead was shattered beyond repair. What started as a hidden affair ended in violence, broken trust, and the unraveling of a complicated web of lies. This story serves as a reminder that the consequences of betrayal can reach far beyond the initial act, touching lives in unexpected and painful ways. It warns of the dangers of taking justice into one's own hands and the importance of confronting pain with courage and care rather than violence. Ultimately, Mark's story is not just about an affair or a violent reaction. It is about the fragile nature of trust, the devastating impact of secrets, and the difficult road toward healing when everything falls apart. It leaves viewers to wonder what could have been done differently, and whether justice was ever truly served in the tangled aftermath of betrayal and revenge.